Good good evening, everybody. Welcome to Bible study. I'm so excited to be back and finishing this, what has now become a series, rebuilding what is broken, going through the story of Nehemiah. So last week, I encouraged you guys, even when I began, to say good evening in the comments. So please do that again. Make sure that you grab your notebooks, your pen, are in a quiet space so that you can receive of the Lord tonight. I'm so excited. I want to remind you of why we're studying this and what the Lord gave me specifically for the purpose of this assignment. And so that is whatever the Lord is rebuilding in you or around you in this season, it is established so that it will not fall. I want to encourage you, if you did not if you were not with us last week for a Bible study, I want to encourage you to go back and watch part 1 of Rebuilding What is Broken. Because we went through a lot of things, and I want to recap those before we jump into tonight. So just a recap of last week, we talked about how Nehemiah recognized that there was a divine opportunity and a gap that he himself could fill. And so Nehemiah hears about this wall in Jerusalem, that it is broken down and its gates have been burned down with fire. And Nehemiah becomes grieved about it, but he also begins to fast and pray about what he should specifically do about that wall being down. And then we talked about how we see him acknowledging and agreeing fully with the assignment of rebuilding the wall. And we also talked about how we recognize that he had such a willingness to go and such a willingness to be used in that perspective, and also that there was no resistance when he offered himself, his gifts to rebuild the wall, and that he was also found asking for what he needed to be successful, and those things were actually given to him so that he could go to this assignment. All right, so we learned all of that last week. We explored it, and we were going through Nehemiah 1, and we were also a little bit in Nehemiah 2, 1 through 10. All right. And so tonight I said we're going to explore some strategies that Nehemiah leveraged when he actually went to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall. So first, I want to kind of define that there are 3 types of strategies. All right. There's one business strategy, which actually falls into it just being the plan itself. Right. So what is the strategy that we need to start the assignment? Then there's a strategy called operational strategy. So this is defined as the refining of that original plan, right? Refining of different initiatives so that we are enabled to run and successfully implement the plan that we started with. And then there's also transformational strategy, right? And so this is where there are bigger changes necessary so that what we're building, what we're establishing can ensure that we have long-term success. And so as I'm teaching tonight, I want you to think about all 3 of those different dimensions: business, operational, and transformational, so that you not only begin to build the wall effectively, but in the middle of the race, you're able to be equipped and enabled to keep on running. And you also ensure your long-term success. All right. So we found out in Nehemiah 4:19 last night that the work is extensive and it is spread out. And so tonight I'm going to be focusing on that the job, the wall, the assignment is bigger than you, but it can be done. So let's go to Nehemiah 2, starting at verse 17. It says, "Then I said to them, you see the trouble that we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem." I want you to type in the comments, us. "Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." 18 says, "I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. And they replied, let us," type us, "start rebuilding." And so they began to do the good work. So Father, we thank you tonight for this word, that you're going to give us strategy, that you're going to illuminate the plan so that we not only are successful at the start of our assignment, but that we have the momentum and the tenacity that we need to carry this thing through long-term success. All right. So let's go back to chapter number 2. In verse 11, it says, "I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days." So this is a picture of Nehemiah actually going to Jerusalem. So actually going to the place that he was assigned to rebuild the wall. And in 12, it says, "I set out during the night with a few others. I had not told anyone at this point what my God was doing or had told me in my heart to do for Jerusalem," right? I had not shared this assignment just yet. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. So, a couple points that I want to definitely point out in verse number 11. It first says that Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem alone, right? But he was not rebuilding this wall alone, but he went to the assignment first alone. When he got there, he waited 3 days before doing anything. And I really want us to realize that this is important, right? Why does Nehemiah go to the assignment and wait? He doesn't rush right in, right? I believe that this was a picture of Nehemiah practicing a skill of patience, right? I know that I'm called to this assignment. I know that I'm called to this place, but I'm not going to rush right in, right? I'm going to be patient and just take a look around, because this was where Nehemiah was inspecting the assignment that he had been sent to. Verse 12 says he set out with a few others. So at this point, he's no longer alone, right? And so I believe that goes back to what we talked about last week and how we have to leverage relationships in the assignment. I think this was a picture of Nehemiah applying wisdom. So these are all characteristics that Nehemiah had to embody when he first came upon the assignment. He was patient. He didn't rush right in. He waited 3 days before doing anything. He also was wise, right? He didn't go and look and inspect the wall alone. He took a few others with him. Then it also says that he did not tell anyone at this point what he was in Jerusalem for. I believe that this was a picture of discipline and knowing and understanding the times and the seasons of which your assignment is supposed to be accomplished. But I also think that this was waiting for clarity and understanding before he began to speak and communicate what the assignment actually was. It also says that there were no mounts with him except the one he was riding on. And so the mount meant the horse or the vehicle that he had actually rode into Jerusalem on, right? And that told me that Nehemiah packed light. And for me, that was a picture of circumcision, right? Meaning that there was a period in time of his journey of going to Jerusalem that he had to understand the importance of development and also like allowing him his heart, his motive, and all of those things to be circumcised. He was light. He only had what he rode in with. All right. And I think those are all important characteristics about coming upon the assignment and coming to the assignment: patience, wisdom, discipline, and development. All right. Verse number 13 says, by night I went out through the valley gate. This is Nehemiah. After he came into the city for 3 days, and then he went to inspect the gate. It says he went by night. By night, I went through the valley gate toward the jackal well and the dung gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. What does it mean for us to examine the walls of Jerusalem? I don't believe the words are by happenstance, but I believe that Nehemiah and whoever wrote this part of the scriptures were being very specific. And so I looked up the definition of what it means to examine the walls or examine the area in which the assignment is located. And examine means to inspect someone or something, right? So we can't just inspect, the team or the ministry that we're called to, or the industry, right? We have to also inspect the people, inspect someone or something in detail, right? We can't half do it. To determine their nature or condition, investigate thoroughly. It also means to test the knowledge or proficiency of someone by requiring them to answer questions or perform tasks. This was important because as Nehemiah recognized that there was an examination period that needed to be done when he before he could fully operate in his next assignment, he had to understand that people matter, right? To understand who was supposed to build with him, he had to go and examine the place of his assignment. It also said that nature and conditions matter. So the nature of your heart, the nature of your motive, the condition in which this assignment is located, all of the things matter, not just the assignment, but everything that is surrounding the assignment as well. It also says examine means proficiency. So proficiency also matters, right? We need skilled and equipped people in their assignment, not just people passionate about the place of their assignment, but we need them to be skilled and we need them to be equipped. Verse number 14 says, then Nehemiah moved onward to the fountain gate. So not only did he start inspecting the valley gate, but then he went toward the fountain gate. So someone say that you have to inspect you have to, more than one aspect has to be examined. And this is why I said you have to examine yourself. You have to examine your motive. You have to examine your purpose. You have to examine this place that you've been sent to, which is why I believe that he did not just rush right in, because patience was required for this examination, right? If he was in a haste, that means that his perspective could have been blurry, right? It could have been distorted. And so he went from one gate to the next gate, still examining. It says, but there was not enough room for his mount to get through. So that tells me that although at the very beginning they told us that he only had a little bit with him, even as he moved throughout the examining phase, it says some of what he still had could not go. Right? So it's important to be circumcising your heart, allowing your motives, your intention, your gifts, everything about you to be developed as you move throughout the assignment, right? He packed light, but then also it came to a point where he could not take even some of the things he still had. All right. So we can't carry dead weight into the new assignment. We can't carry old hurt into the new assignment. All right. In 15, it says, so I went up the valley by night. And this is all about Nehemiah saying, examining the wall. Finally, he says, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. Why did he have to turn back to re-enter? I believe that this was a picture of Nehemiah's willingness, even along the journey, to be circumcised, to be developed, to be sharpened, but also his willingness to make adjustments. He turned around and had to re-enter a place that he had already gone through the examining phase. All right. I'm moving fast tonight because I'm on a time limit, but he had to go back. So that means he had to have a willingness to make adjustments. All right. In 16, it says, the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as of yet, I had still not said anything to the Jews or the priests or the nobles or the officials or any of those who would be doing the work. To me, again, this painted a picture that he waited for clarity before communicating to those that he would partner with to build the wall. Patience. Patience is a virtue. This is why I believe those who rebuilt the wall with him in the scriptures we're about to go through helped him and were willing to trust his vision, right? And do the work. Because by the time he communicated with them, he had clarity on what they were supposed to do, clarity in how they were supposed to operate, clarity, right? It was important before he opened his mouth. 17 says, then I said to them, you see the trouble. We're in Jerusalem, right? And Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned by fire. This is a picture of leadership 101, entering the assignment one-on-one. He not only saw that there was trouble in Jerusalem, but he communicated what the trouble in Jerusalem was. He communicated, here's a challenge that I believe that we can take on and we can accomplish together. He even went so far to describe what that challenge was, which means that one of his characteristics as a leader, and that one that was sent to that assignment, meant that he had to be vulnerable and he had to be transparent. He couldn't puff it up and say, hey, I believe that we're all here for the fluffy, right? He said, no, the city is in ruins. The walls are down, right? I'm being transparent in what I've seen and I'm communicating. This is a challenge that I believe that we can go and we can partner and we can rebuild the wall together. It says, come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and we will no longer be in disgrace. So that means he humbled himself and he invited those that had skills and that were equipped to help him rebuild the wall. He invited them to partner with him. This was not a solo job. I said that last week, right? And then it says he not only understood it, but he explained the benefit and the purpose of which the assignment was. Because he didn't just say, hey, let's build the wall and that's it. Are you willing? He said, let's rebuild the wall because this will help us no longer be in this particular area. This will help us no longer be in this particular state. This will help us no longer be toiling over the vision or toiling over the building to come up, but we'll be prepared when the boatloads of people walk through the door. Right? And so this was all him executing in the beginning of his assignment, right? He was willing to make adjustments. He was willing, he had different characteristics that were good and needed for his assignment. He had patience, he had wisdom, he had transparency. He was being developed as a leader while he was leading. Because sometimes we feel like we have to be already a leader or already perfect, but he was being developed in the midst of the assignment. So not only was the assignment his job or his, doing, but the assignment was also developing him. So it's not just you going to do the big thing, but it's that the assignment will also grow and mature you in the midst. This is why you have to offer no resistance, because when you offer resistance and you won't go, it means that you limit your ability to grow in this season. You limit your ability to be developed, because this is the assignment that develops you for the next thing and the next assignment and the next business venture and the ministry outside of the four walls of the church, right? And it says, they replied, let us start rebuilding. And then the work began. That was all the explanation that they needed. That was all Nehemiah had to do, was go in and inspect the land, see what was wrong, see what the challenge was, come up with a plan and why, and then invite others to partner with him to do the assignment. This is why it's so important for us to go through the process and not circumvent the process, right? Because the process is examining us, it's developing us, it's maturing us. 19 says, but when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite, official, and Geshem and Arab heard about it, so these are outside people, they mocked and ridiculed us. They mocked Nehemiah and those Nehemiah invited to partner with him on the assignment. They said, what is this that you are doing? They asked, are you rebelling against the king? And I believe that we're going to explore opposition next week, because Apostle told me that there's going to be a part 3 of this. And so we're going to explore opposition next week and how not to abandon the assignment even when opposition comes. But these were key questions in the midst of the beginning of the rebuilding of the wall that I believe were important. The question was, what is this that you are doing? So this means that these people challenge him to clarify the assignment. There will be moments when you enter the assignment that you will have to clarify what it is you are here for. For those that doubt, that don't believe, or those that just have not been giving insight of why you have to, why you've been sent to this particular team, this particular ministry, this particular industry. They said, what is it that you are doing? So they challenged him to clarify his assignment. So that means he had to have a knowing. He had to be grounded in, hey, this is my assignment and this is why I'm here. The second question was, are you rebelling against the king? And this was key because it challenged his motive. It challenged his clarity, but it also challenged his motive, which tells me that along the journey, you will continually have to remind yourself that this is an assignment from God and not an assignment just to be seen. Right? You will continually have to say, I'm not, the assignment's not about me. I'm not going against what's already been established, but my motive, my intention, my heart is pure. Right? And these are all things that develop him. If it's not tested, then it can't be proven. So these are things that we should expect as we enter the assignment. 20 says, I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. So Nehemiah didn't just hear the questions that they asked, but he was grounded. He had an answer. He had a response in his tongue. He says, no, the God of heaven. So he reminded them, it's not about me, it's about God. The God of heaven will give us success. He didn't say give me, give us success. So now he's in leader mode, right? He's speaking on behalf of those that have partnered with him. The God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. We will not be discouraged because you're asking us questions, because you don't have the full wherewithal of why I'm here, right? And why this assignment is mine. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. That's what Nehemiah said. He said, but as for you, you have no share in what we're building, right? And I believe that when he said the God of heaven will give us success, I believe that he was somehow subconsciously warring against and pushing back the spirit of pride that would say, I will give us success because I'm the one leading this assignment, or I'm the one being sent to this assignment. And in the midst of the journey, we have to realize that pride will be lethal to the rebuilding. Pride is one of those things that will go undetected for weeks and months and even years, right? And pride is the thing that distorts reality, that says it's not God that will give us success, but it's me. And we don't want to go into the assignment with that perspective, because pride will tempt you to believe because you've been given a post, or that you're given a post void of your posture being continually examined. When you accept and you fully agree with the assignment, you must know that your posture must continually be examined. You must continually allow yourself to be brought low, to be humble, because that's the only way that something can be erected, something that can be done through you. All right? He sent a reminder and he declared it with his mouth. No, this is a God thing. He will give us success. And then they started rebuilding. And then that part that says that he turned back and says, as for you. So he began to speak to those that were mocking him. Maybe it was in the natural, maybe it was in the spirit. I don't know. But I believe that he had the audacity to not only know his place, to be humble and submitted for the assignment, but to lovingly correct others when they were also out of their place. So we have to know those that we labor with enough to lovingly correct and say, hey, I see you out of place. But we have to do everything with love, right? And we also have to watch our confession while we are rebuilding, because those who began to mock and ridicule Nehemiah and those that were coming alongside him to rebuild the wall during the examination period, they lost their claim to what was being erected, right? Maybe they lost their seat on the team. They lost their claim to or any right to what was being built, all because of their disbelief and their declaration. Remember, some will only have the capacity to stand and watch the rebuilding of the wall. They were not a part of the rebuilding, but they were mocking from the side. And I'm not saying that everyone that stands on the side has to be a mocker, but everyone's just not called to the assignment. Everyone is called to an individual assignment, but that doesn't mean we're called to the same assignment. And so pack light. Don't take people to the assignment with you that are not destined to be there, because there's a risk of damage as you are rebuilding. Be mindful that offense does not enter your heart when people begin to question and challenge you, because that on the other side of that challenge, God is developing you to be able to stand, to be able to be planted firmly. All right? But also be courageous enough to challenge disbelief as you stand in your assignment. Be courageous enough to challenge mediocrity, not only in others, but also in yourself. All right? I don't believe that Nehemiah would have had the authority to challenge the mockers if he had not first dealt with himself. All right? So it's not just enough to understand you have an assignment, to agree with it, to be willing to go, if you're not willing to be developed and processed in the midst. This is what Nehemiah was doing, and I'm sure his team had to as well, because it flows down from the leader. All right? Nehemiah, I think it was chapter 3. We go into all the people that were building the wall. And I can't read all of the scriptures, so I'll have to summarize. But there were 31 scriptures dedicated to who helped Nehemiah rebuild this wall, right? And it says that each of these people were responsible for a certain section of the wall or the ministry or the team, and they were responsible for rebuilding. And it also shows us the strategy that each person used individually. And again, I can't read it all, so I hope you took action last week when I challenged you to read it in advance. But I do want to point out a few things that I noticed. Again, Nehemiah 4:19 said the work is expansive and it is spread out, meaning that we cannot all flock to one area of the wall. We must spread our gifts out. We can't always be next to the person that we're comfortable with. We must spread ourselves out because the work is expansive. And while I understand that everyone has a preference, just like me, I was like, my preference is one time. Teach one time and we're gone, right? But preference will always have you half doing most things. But that's not the point. So I want to say, we have to just consider and remember that the work is expansive, right? And because the work is expansive, I want you to ask yourself, what are you passionate about while also being proficient? Because passion is not enough. Passion and proficiency must be coupled together for this next level of dispersing assignments. It must be. Also, ask yourself, what skills do I have that are transferable? Sometimes we leave those corporate skills out. Sometimes we leave those skills we use in business out. But what skills do I have that can be transferable to the kingdom, to the body, right? And then all of these things, in the midst of all of these things, also ask yourself, where is the current demand? Because sometimes you have a skill set that's not being currently demanded in this season, but will be demanded in another thing because there's a certain order that we have to build in, right? We have to build floor 1, then 2, then 3. And that doesn't mean that we don't embrace all of you, but it's that we need this part of you in this season. And so this is how I want you, these 3 questions is what I want you to ask yourself this week as you begin to locate the assignment. Last week, it was your willingness to go. But now I want you to actually locate the assignment because he's given us everything we need inside of the house. It's simply that we have somewhat become unaware of what is in the house currently. And that's one, because a lot of us are hiding in positions that we shouldn't be, so we can't be seen. Or 2, we've not been willing to really be relational enough to understand each other beyond Sunday morning. And First Thessalonians 5:12 says, and we admonish you to know those that labor among you. So not just know my name, but know the gifts that I carry, know the character that I carry, so that when a assignment and a challenge comes up, I can say, oh yes, Natasha should do that. She has like 10 years in people operations and such, right? Sarah should do that. I remember her talking that she, was passionate about mental health awareness and things of that sort. But we have to know those that labor among us. All right. So I want to point out these last things before I close that I noticed inside of them describing the builders of the wall. And I think it's like 5 or 6 things. All right. First point was that the priests went first. In Nehemiah 3:3, it says, Elishib, I believe, the high priest and his fellow priests went to work and rebuild the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place. So this told me that, again, the priests went first and they started with the sheep gate. So not only did the priests go first and leave there to be a sacrifice, right, in the rebuilding, but also the sheep gate was important because the sheep come in and go out. And here they find pasture, right? They find life and love at rivers. And so it was important to start the rebuilding with the priests and to start where the sheep go in and out. It also says that they dedicated the gate to the Lord and they set and established some doors in place, which means that they decided that the rebuilding was for the sake of God's glory only. So not only must you agree with the assignment, go to the assignment, but you also have to dedicate and decide that this will be for God's glory only and nothing else. In verse 2, it says the men of Jericho begin to build an adjoining section, which also tells me that every person, every team, every ministry, every industry must be next to or join with another. Say you can't go at it alone. Because if that section was not adjoined to the next, what we risked was proper blood flow. We risked every joint being supplied, every joint being used properly. So don't forget that there must be an adjoining section. The prayer team just can't operate by itself. Sometimes they need the prophets to come in and prophesy, right? That's why we do harp and bowl. Think about your business. Sometimes you need coaching and mentorship, therapy and, something else. In verse number 4, it says they were continually making repairs, which means that when they came to the assignment, as they were operating in the assignment and rebuilding the walls, there was continual fixing, mending, reevaluating, and consistent improvement. You can't just establish it and then walk away and think that it's not going to need continual improvement, continual fixing, continual reevaluation. All right. In verse 6, it talked about reinforcement. It says they mentioned how every section had beams, doors, bolts, and bars, meaning that every piece and every season will reinforce the other. So this time, again, what is established won't fall or be subject to the elements. Every piece and every season will reinforce the next. In verse 13, it highlights multiple people with multiple assignments. It said the fountain gate was repaired by Shallum, but then it also said that he also repaired the wall of repaired the wall of the pool of Siloam. And I believe that this was the only scripture where I saw this happening, which made me want to really communicate it. That says that some people will have single assignments in the rebuilding, but others will have multiple assignments. So don't limit yourself. All of you, again, is welcome here. And I talked about last week how we offer no resistance. Nehemiah received no resistance in the embracing of him and all of the gifts that he carried. So please understand when you are a single assignment person in the rebuilding and when you have multiple assignments in the rebuilding. In verse 22, they highlighted that there was help that came in from the outside. And this is the last one I want to share tonight. It says, verse 22 said, the repairs next to the section rebuilt in verse 21 was made by the priests in the surrounding region, which highlighted to me that help is in the house, but it's also going to be coming from outside the city. So be open to that. Be open to being the person that is sent to do the rebuilding, but be open for other people to help. And sometimes it's inside the house, and other times it's people that we have to bring in from surrounding regions to help us do what we're doing inside the house. It was important. And I want you to go back and I want you to read those 31 verses. But those are just the 5 things that I just really, that stood out to me. The work was spread out. The work was spread out. The priests went first. The sheep gate was the first thing that they rebuilt, right? Then there were adjoining sections so that every joint could supply and that the proper blood flow would not be cut off. That there were projects, but in the midst of accomplishing projects, there was processes that we had to go through and things we had to reevaluate and things that we had to improve. There was also reinforcement, beams, doors, bolts, bars to reinforce the first level and the second level and the third level. They kept thinking forward. Then there were people that had single assignments, and then there were other people that had multiple assignments. Then there was help not only inside the city, but also coming from the surrounding regions outside of the city. And so this is really a picture tonight of different strategies that Nehemiah leveraged in the beginning of his assignment. And at this point, I believe the wall was only half rebuilt. So again, this is the process of going into the assignment, the beginning stages, allowing yourself to be developed, checking your heart's intention, being challenged in some ways, but standing firm on your understanding of what your assignment is, that you're called to rebuild, that you're called to fill a gap that must be filled, that you're here, you're equipped, you're proficient, you're willing, right? But it's just some things that we have to remember. And these are all strategies. I feel like the main strategy was the character within the person completing the assignment, not necessarily the work that was done with the other hands. That was like ladder of the scriptures. But the first was the internal building, the internal rebuilding, so that that internal development could then reinforce everything we put our hands to do. So Father, I just thank you for tonight. I thank you, oh God, for just illumination And this process, this season, this gap that you have us in understanding that, number one, we have a place and that we're willing to go. We understand that there will be no resistance when we offer our willingness in this season, but also understanding, oh God, that it's not just about the assignment alone, but it's about what you're doing on the inside of us so that we can actually manifest the kingdom on earth, oh God. I thank you, oh God, that we're willing to not only recognize assignments, but we're willing to allow you to examine us in this season, oh God, so that we're worthy to rebuild the wall, that we have the wherewithal and the inner capacity to put our hands to work. I thank you, oh God, that you would just begin to visit us in the night season and that you would begin to highlight, oh God, the area, the assignment, that we begin to ask ourselves more specific questions. What skills do I have? Where can I be needing? God, what in my heart needs to be challenged? Where are you trying to examine me so that what I produce is not tainted, but it's sober, but that it's clean? Because when the bricks had to go up, they had to be touched. So, Father, allow us to have pure hearts and clean hands in this season so that what we're rebuilding won't just not fall, but it'll be clean. It'll be acceptable in your sight. Do the work in us, Father, so that we can do the work on your behalf, so that we can literally manifest your kingdom on the earth. We understand that the assignment is so much bigger than us. We understand that you will highlight, oh God, those that you desire to partner with us to do the work. But we thank you for the clarity that we obtain before we even speak anything out of our mouth. We thank you, oh God, that we'll be conscious of our declarations and we'll eliminate all disbelief in this season that will cause us not to rebuild the wall, that will cause us to just hover around this section and hear a good message and attend a good Bible study, but not take action. We cast down all disbelief in the name of Jesus. And we thank you, oh God, for this strategy and this refinement of not only our hearts and our motives, oh God, but our gifts. Let them be sharpened in this season so they can actually be a tool in our hand. They can chisel when they're supposed to chisel. They can glue the bricks when they're supposed to glue. They can water the plants around the building when it needs to be watered. Thank you, oh God, for doing the work in us so that we can establish the work, so you can establish the work through us in the name of Jesus. So I hope you guys enjoyed tonight. I'm going to be back next week. Again, if you missed part one, go back. I believe it was a powerful study of the beginning of locating your assignment and that willingness, because that willingness is really needed even before understanding that this inner development and this inner process has to be worked on you. You have to first say yes. First say yes. First recognize that there's a divine opportunity, and then you can leverage, right? Then you can leverage that process and you can go through it with understanding and assurance that you are called to a specific area and to fill a specific gap in this season. So I want to admonish you guys to give tonight. And like I said, next week, we're going to not only talk about the strategy, but we're going to talk about opposition as he rebuilt the next part of the wall, because this was only halfway point. But I want to admonish you to give and to seed into what the Lord is doing to you. Every level requires a different seed. All right. Every level requires a different seed. And so these are our 5 ways to give. You can text to give. You can send it by mail. You can use Cash App, $Rivers HOP for the House of Prayer. You can also give by Zelle at the email address give@riverschicago.com. And you can also give on the Rivers Chicago app. And so I believe we're going to still do our confession tonight over our seeds that we are planting in the ground. And so we'll wait for them to get the confession up. And so let's declare this over the seed that you're going to put in the ground tonight. This seed breaks cycles of poverty and it establishes God's covenant here at Rivers. This seed creates environments that exalt Jesus Christ, that educate the believer and engage the culture. This seed creates environments for people to know Jesus Christ. I'm going to add, and to know their assignment in this season. This seed causes the manifestation of the house of prayer. We sow it in faith and we receive power to get wealth in Jesus' name. I hope you guys were blessed tonight. We were on a time limit, and so we want to be respectful to that set before us. And so next week, I'll be back to finish what I could not get out tonight. But please go back and watch this. If you were not able to take notes or you were just engaging with the culture in the comments tonight, please go back throughout the week and take some notes and allow yourself to sit with God so that you can not only see this in a corporate or a massive way, but you can really allow the Lord to minister to you individually. And so then next Wednesday, we'll come back and we'll finish up this series about Nehemiah. So first, we recognize that there was an assignment. We got strategy to leverage in the process of carrying out the assignment. And then we must talk about the opposition that will definitely come as the rebuilding is getting higher and higher and higher and closer to the goal that we want to accomplish, because God gives us strategy and wherewithal for that as well. So I love you, family, and I'll see you next week.